Don't listen to my own directions, do I? I'd like to call the Burke County Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting to order, Tuesday, February the 4th, 2025. Madam Clerk, we got Commissioner Stroud, Commissioner Barrier, Commissioner Smith here. Commissioner Britton is on he's on work release with REA, and Commissioner Burns is pretty sick. I talked to him a while ago, so we got 3 in attendance. We have a quorum. I'd like to ask everybody to silence their mobile devices and remind the speakers again that when you come up to the podium to please activate your microphones before speaking so YouTube can pick it up and record it. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Mr. Chairman, or Vice Chairman, we do have one item that came in, an additional application for the Child Protection, Child Fatality Prevention Team. And so I would make a motion that we move that to our items for decision.
I think that's a good motion there, sir. Do I have all agreement on that? Raise your hand. Thank you. That's unanimous, Madam Clerk. Our next item on the agenda is presentations with the Western Piedmont Council of Governments Transportation Update presented by Avery Ritchie. Good to see her again. Hadn't seen her in a while.
All right, thanks for having me, you guys. So, as Commissioner Smith said, I am Avery Ritchie. I'm the transportation I'm the transportation planning manager for the Greater Hickory MPO and the Western Piedmont Council of Governments. I will start off by saying that this presentation is rather long. If you want me to cut out parts of it, I am more than happy to. So with that said, I was just going to give a brief overview and not go through the entire presentation. So I will, cover the main topics. The first being just what actually is the MPO, what does it do, what are our planning documents that we have approved each year, that we're under federal law and regulation for producing those documents. Who are our MPO partners? How do they fit in? What are the roles of our Transportation Advisory Committee, as well as our Transportation Coordinating Committee? I understand we have a few new TAC members, especially from Burke County. So I feel like this will be helpful, just understanding the role of both of those transportation boards as we move forward. So again, what we produce, policies that are important in regard to DOT, how we can get additional items such as bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure included in funded highway projects free of charge if the facility is feasible. Our prioritization submittal system, which is basically a fancy way of saying our transportation applications that we submit to DOT every 2 years, including a brief summary of what projects we submitted to DOT this past year in coordination with DOT. Our funded projects in the State Transportation Improvement Program, and this will include all modes, so highway, bicycle and pedestrian, rail, and aviation. So additional funding opportunities, whether that's for bike ped or highway. Public transit, what is happening with the current flex routes that you see in Morganton, as well as the micro transit service area that's surrounding those flex routes. So our long-range transportation plans and what our adopted recommendations are included in those long-range transportation plans. Again, they're not funded, but they're recommended ones. And just updates on funded projects in general, whether that's, at exit 118 there, typical sections, what you can expect in terms of right-of-way and construction dates, whether it's the current STIP or the draft STIP that was newly released. And then just a general update on passenger rail. So the rail line running from Asheville to Salisbury, that there's a lot of push for passenger rail along that corridor. where we're at in that whole process, because only one very small phase of that project is funded currently, and what we're moving towards in step 2. And then, I think I have a slide that wraps up how all of this fits into general land use planning. Yeah. I know that's kind of a lot, but I feel like a lot of it is important. So again, I'm happy to make changes before the meeting if you feel that that's necessary. So does anyone have any questions or concerns?
I've got a feeling the next one's gonna be a lot longer.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Thank you for coming, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's good to hear.
Okay, without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Okay, now we will have our presentation of fiscal year 23-24 audit presented by our county manager, Brian Epley.
Commissioner Smith, members of the board, this is a continued item from last month. Our audit firm, Thompson Price Scott Adams, Alan Thompson's the principal partner. We're scheduled to be here in January, but the storm that hit the eastern part of the state delayed them, so we've carried that item forward. Each of you have received your audit, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. We have, as a reminder, assembled an audit committee. Chairman Britton participates representing the board, and then my office and our finance office also participate on that committee. This was the first year of an audit relationship change. For, I guess, the last 20 years or so, Burke County had partnered with or had hired a contracted auditor that we then transitioned this year. So it was the first year of Thompson Price Scott and Adams. I'm thrilled with the service that we got. I think it was thorough. I think it was meaningful. They've given us some recommendations on how we can be better. And I think that's part of being high performing is using those recommendations to make sure that we have a more, a higher quality product, a more efficient ran organization. So again, Alan will be here on the 17th to present that audit report, those financial statements, as well as the compliance and opinion letters are in your packet. Certainly, I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have, but he has a standard and a regulatory requirement to report certain things to you all, and so he'll be here to do that.
Thank you, sir. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you, sir. Next, we'll have an update on the interbasin transfer presented by Hugh Sandow, who's the budget strategy and performance analyst for Burke County.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Smith, members of the board. So I'm here standing in on behalf of Mr. Anthony Starr, who will be here at your regular meeting to give you an update on the status of the interbasin transfer request from Charlotte Water. As you may recall, spring of this past year, Charlotte requested with the state, filed a formal notice of intent to request an increase to 33 million gallons of water per day that would be transferred out of the Catawba River Basin into the Yadkin PD Basin. So basically this request would, if it was granted, would allow them to have guaranteed access to a set amount of water increase over what they're allowed to draw today. Just for context, between Morganton and Lenoir and Catawba County and Hickory and Valdez, they draw approximately 40 million gallons per day. So this request is doubling their existing allowance of water and is almost as much as all of the communities around us are drawing today, which could really hamper future growth and development and sustainment of the water system that we have here. In response to that request, the Western Piedmont Council of Governments formed a committee to advise and make recommendations as far as how to respond to that request and how to address it. I serve on that committee along with representatives from Catawba County, Caldwell County, and some of the municipalities in the area. We've been working through how to respond to that and how to attend the community meetings that Charlotte is hosting ahead of what will happen spring of next year, 2026. Charlotte will issue an official environmental impact report, which ultimately will go to the state for either approval, modification, or denying. So Anthony is going to come in 2 weeks and kind of give you a full updates. It's been almost a year since this process started. Talk through all of the strategies that the COG is working through and some of the partners we've engaged in order to make sure that this request is dealt with in the most equitable way possible. Happy to answer any questions that you might have, but he is going to be the expert and he'll have a presentation for you as well at your regular meeting.
Anybody got any questions? With that objection, this item will also remain on the agenda. Next on the pre-agenda is a Western Piedmont Community College presentation of financial data for the period ending December the 31st, 2024, which was to be presented by Ms. Sandy Holman, the Chief Financial Officer over at the college. And she won't do a presentation today. We're going to give the entire presentation at the regular meeting in a couple weeks. Without objection, this will remain on the agenda. Okay. Next on our agenda is the Health Department. Local Health Director is receiving the Dogwood Award. This will be presented by Ashley Jarrett, the Assistant Health Director. Hey, Ashley.
Thanks for having me. I'm here to recognize Danny Scalise, our Health Director, on his receiving of the former Attorney General's Josh Steins Dogwood Award. It's established in 2017 and recognizes citizens across North Carolina for their work in protecting the health and safety and well-being of citizens in their community. So he received this because of the great work he's done over the last 3 years in Burke County, and the recognition is really important. It doesn't come lightly, and we just wanted to recognize and celebrate him for that. So thank you.
Has anybody got any questions? Yes, sir.
I just want to say thank you. Appreciate that. Any rewards we get, man, we love them. So thank you, Danny. Good job, man.
Thank you. Without objection, this item will also remain on the agenda. Next, we have our Animal Shelter Pet of the Month, presented by Caitlin Settlemeyer. Good to see her again. She's the Animal Services Director for Burke County.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having us back this month to present Cat and a Dog from Animal Services. That will be your Pet of the Month, and we'll also share just a few updates that we have at Animal Services during the regular meeting.
Thank you, Caitlin. Without an objection, this item will also remain on the agenda.
Thanks.
Next on our pre-agenda is scheduled public hearings. As of now, we have none. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. First item on that is a Burke County Public Schools presentation of financial data for the period ending December 31st, 2024, presented by our good friend Keith Lawson, who's the finance officer for the schools. Good afternoon, Keith.
Good afternoon, Mr. Smith, Commissioner Barrier, Commissioner Strout.
Mr. Lawson.
Pleasure to be before you today.
Yes, sir.
I know this will be new to the two of you, so I like to keep this informal when I present. Feel free to interrupt, ask a question, and I'll certainly at the end entertain any questions you may have. The first slide in your board packet, you'll see the first two columns fall under a header of annual. This would be our previous year's annual revenues received by source compared to our current forecasted revenues. If we may hop over to the right under the next two columns called December year-to-date. So this will be our December year-to-date actual revenues received by funding source. The first line would be our state revenues. As you can see, year-to-year, mid-year results were up 4.5%. That is a little stronger than we had budgeted and anticipated being at this point. I will say that it's a result of what's not a problem, but is that we are, for the first time since COVID, really at what we consider full employment. I think you all probably have suffered the same thing during the COVID epidemic of being shorthanded and people not returning to the workforce, but we've, at least in Burke County Public Schools this year, have experienced that. So it's been a wonderful budget management issue to have from my perspective, for folks to be shorthanded, not necessarily the best thing for education. So I'm glad to see that we are running at this rate right now, and will continue and anticipate doing so over the course of this year. It's not an alarming amount, and we are set with other avenues and alternatives to offset this minor increase. Next, you'll see our federal revenues. And going across year-to-date, you'll see that's a very, very substantial reduction of 57.1%. I'm sure you all can guess that's our COVID funds or emergency secondary emergency relief funding. That, of course, is expired, so we no longer have those funds available to us, so we are back to historical spending levels as far as federal revenues are concerned. Next, we have a line item of local and charter schools, that being you all and the funds that you provide Burke County Public Schools. You're our second largest funding source, and of course, we're running right on schedule as far as those revenues received. Next, fines and forfeitures, which you're the pass-through agent of. Those come to the county from the courthouse, of fines and forfeitures that are collected there and passed along to the school system. Our next line item is school receivables, and that's things that we at the central office pay for and invoice the schools for. It's really a inconsequential amount of funds compared to our overall funding, and although the percentage increase is pretty substantial, the dollar amount's inconsequential. Next, we have our special revenue funds. You can see it's up substantially year to year at this point. We are back fully operational in our special revenue funds, and that consists of things, just for your information, of like our pre-K programs, Medicaid revenues received that support our exceptional children's programs, and also another area that is a result of the substantial increase under special revenue funds is our Gear Up program. We have been for the last, I think, 5 years, the recipient of a Gear Up program, which is federal funds that passes through Appalachian State University that we use to expose our middle and high school students to the higher education learning experience, resources, and those kinds of things that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. We, this year, have received yet a second round of those funds. So that's a huge infusion to Burke County Public Schools in order to provide those resources for our kids. The next slide is specifically local funding and how we are spending those funds by source. As you can see at the top, expenses, there's a 5XXX, a 6, a 7, or an 8, and a 4. This represents the local funds that you all provide Burke County Public Schools and how those are being utilized. For instance, the 5XXX is regular instructional services. So that would be teachers, instructional supplies for the schools and things of that nature. Next, instructional support. That's primarily maintenance of facilities. Then we have our other governmental units, which consist of paying charter schools as well as Avery County schools. We have children that live in Jonas Ridge that, for safety concerns, we don't transport them down the mountain to attend Burke, but we pay for those children to attend Avery County schools. The all-important line is the very next one, the 4XXX. And if you'll look to the far right, under total, you'll see with parentheses, $343,114. What that represents is usage of fund balance through mid-year. We've forecasted to utilize $489,000 of fund balance for the entire year, and through mid-year, we've utilized $343,000. So there again, we're running just a little stronger than anticipated. Again, that's a result of, we don't have the relief of ESSER funds that's helped aid our operational local budget the last few years. And we're also at full employment. 53 employees, maintenance employees in that department received a 3% state legislated wage increase. As you all are aware, certified supplements were unfrozen last year. So as a result of that, not only did they increase, but then every year as a result, now that they have been restored, when wage increases are passed along to teachers, that supplement amount increases also, because it's calculated based on their current wages. All in all, the one thing that is disappointing to me is I always make it a point to try to reduce our budgeted fund balance usage by at least 50%. I don't see that happening this year. But again, we're in good financial position. We have a healthy fund balance, so we anticipate no issues as a result for the short term. So with that said, I'll certainly be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
If there are no questions, right, Mr. Bear's got a question.
Hey Keith, I was just curious with the loss of the federal COVID funding, are there any programs or staffing that we hired as part of that are still here that is going to impact those folks?
No, sir. I can assure you, and there are many, many districts across this state that did make those recurring commitments. Burke County Public Schools was not one of those. The very last department that we had where there were remaining employees was our school nursing program. We had 4 school nurses that were still with us that, although they lived past the ESSER funding, their job assignment ended in September of 2024. So now we are back flush with no recurring or beyond ESSER funding commitments.
Any other questions, Mr. Stroud?
Yes, sir. Keith, I'd like to know, what's our, looking over all the documents and things like that we've seen, it seems like we're way behind on our ranking. I haven't wrapped my head around this completely as far as in the state. I know we've come down to 97th, I believe. And, so I know I want Burke County to be great in that area. So I don't want us to be leading in that area. I want us to be down in the...
You're referring to our statewide ranking in funding?
Maybe I'm off a little bit on this. I'm just, Brian?
I think Commissioner is talking about our per pupil funding, local contribution compared to the other roughly 115 or 16 LEAs in North Carolina.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we got all the funding we need for our kids and their systems, whatever we're doing collectively to in that regard. So.
Okay, I'll try to be brief, but if
Just make it brief, yeah.
If looking at this slide, you'll notice that in 2022, 23, you'll see a grand total there of $16.6 million. See that number?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we slide over to 2020 or 23, 24, you see that increases to $20.3 million. That is a direct result of an infusion in cash from you all. We had a very, very long-standing, I guess it was, I don't know, we were one of 2 counties in the entire state of North Carolina that had a certain capital funding that was being set aside and was staying in the capital fund rather than being available for use by the public school system for operational costs. So we were flush in one area and starving in another. Mr. Epley and some of his friends figured out and worked through all that convoluted mess to get to the bottom of that. We had special legislation, as I understand it, that overturned and that original decision. And so now our position, I don't know what it currently stands at. I'll be happy to find that information and get that to you as far as our ranking, but it is much improved over what you were referring to.
And just Just one more thing, the funding, when we get funding, it seems like in the future, it might be great if we, can really be preemptive when this funding runs out, what we're gonna do. I don't know how that stuff works, so y'all be gentle with me and slow. So that when people's positions don't run out. I mean, we don't want people, have a position and feel like they're working and then it's not needed and sorry, the money ran out. We don't want the money to run out next time.
And just for clarification, since we got both you experts in here, that money that was there, that was turned over to the county, Mr. Manager, what was that money originally slotted for, and what could it be used for?
So this is a much longer conversation. It would take about 30 PowerPoint slides to get
We
through.
want the
but-
Reader's Digest version.
Connect the dots, yes. In 1983 and again in 1985, the General Assembly passed special legislation that impacted Burke County only, and essentially there's 2 articles of sales tax that make up about 1.5 cents of what come to the county, and restricted it just for school capital. And at that time, it was drafted for the construction and repair of junior high schools. There were certain triggers put in the legislation that was later litigated in 2005 and 2008. I think Mr. Lawson's worked in this industry for about 20 years, and is that right? Close?
Yes, sir.
And when I arrived, I had never seen anything like it, and it did not make logical sense, as Mr. Lawson said, that the county was receiving about $16.3 million in operational funding, which ranked 99th in the state. But we had $37.5 million of available capital that wasn't being used at all, and was largely restricted. And no one could really explain why, because our capital needs were met. So we had classroom sizes that were far larger than any surrounding school district. We had teacher supplements that had been frozen for 20 years. There were operational needs that weren't being met because of this restriction of capital. So we worked with local legislators to rescind that legislation that was passed more than 40 years ago, freeing up that capital side, which helped us infuse money on the operational side. And I'm glad that Commissioner Berry asked about the ESSER funding. That was a mistake made all across the state where they had these one-time money. ESSER money was like ARPA money for the county, right? It's one-time capital infusion that one could argue was out of some very poor federal fiscal legislation that drove inflation over the last 3 years. It was $4.3 trillion. And of that, Burke County got a component of it. And I think wisely used it for one-time needs, like HVAC needs and those type things, which was wise. There are school districts that touch our county that you could drive to in the next 20 minutes that hired 25, 30 people. And so, that was just a bad formula to begin with because those dollars had an end life. As it relates to where we are, the Board of Commissioners have prioritized classroom size, teacher supplements, increased school funding in the last 2 years by about 25%. And that's taken us from 99th to 96th or 97th, as Commissioner Barrier said. And I think, from my perspective, it's been meaningful, and I hope that it's helped, help accomplish some goals with the school system.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
don't
you,
want
Mr.
to
Adams.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that money that we turned over to them, that money was just sitting there, and if you weren't going to build a new middle school or do construction on a middle school, in other words, it's just going to be sitting there idle doing nothing. Is that correct?
So yeah, the equity in that fund, the amount of surplus in that fund was growing at $6 to $7 million per year when I got here. So there was much more funding than there were needs. And it's important to keep in mind, lots of things have changed in 40 years, right? I mean, lots of things have changed. And there were triggers in that legislation and in the litigation from 05 and 08, the consent orders, that were just impractical to follow, such as there was a benchmark and a trigger that said, once the total sales tax, and this is a judge, anticipating this a long time ago, that when the total revenue exceeded $10 million, that the county could, in a subjective way, rescind 50% of it. Didn't give an exact formula. So I guess my point in sharing that is, it was very complicated to follow. I talked to Margaret on our side and Keith on the school side, and I said, you know, if we gave these rules to 10 different people, I think we'd come up with 10 different outcomes. It's impossible to follow the blueprint, and we're atypical, and at the end of the day, I think we want to put the decision-making authority back in the control of our local school board and our local county commissioners. That legislation essentially put that decision-making in the hands of the courts versus in the hands of our elected officials. And so largely that's what I think we've done, is transition that decision-making back to our boards. And to your point, that all is feeding into a fund that largely helps support capital needs that weren't there, and then also debt service on our 2 high schools that will be paid off next year. So we forecasted it out over a 5-year span, Commissioner, and even though we were operating at a surplus of $7 million already, in 2 years that would have grown to $10 million because the debt service on Drawn and Patton would have expired. And that all comes out of that same fund. The lottery funding from the public school lottery fund goes into that fund, and it just wasn't, in our opinion, being used in the highest and best use way. So no reason the Board of Commissioners couldn't still allocate that for capital. You have the choice now, operations or capital, whereas it was simply restricted for capital that may have not been needed prior to these changes.
Thank you. If there are no objections, then we will leave this item on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you.
It's key.
Next on our agenda is the financial update for the period ending December 31st, 2024 for the Tourism Development Authority, which will be presented by our friend Ed Phillips. He's the CEO of that authority.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here this afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner Smith, for having me. And if you don't know, Commissioner Smith's our new chair of the TDA. It started in January, had our first meeting, doing a great job, so appreciate you being there. I want to talk first about the finances of the TDA. We are in a very strong financial position. We currently have cash assets of $837,671.13. Part of that is in our checking account, part of that is in our capital management account, and earning more interest than we could in the simple checking. Down under liability, and by the way, this is as of 12/31, December 31st. Down under liabilities, I want to explain a couple of things. It says City of Morganton payable and Town of Valdez payable. Our legislation that was created in 2007 allocates a certain amount of money, percentage, to the Town of Valdez and to the City of Morganton for their tourism marketing. And they spend that money first, and then they submit receipts to the TDA to draw that money down. Actually, just this week, the City of Morganton submitted their paperwork, and a check was cut to them for that entire amount, $133,000. Typically, they'll draw it down a couple times a year. Valdez also does the same. And so that money, there's a formula for that they get that money every year. That money can carry forward. It doesn't expire. So if they don't draw it down, it sits there. But we encourage them to draw it down and work with us as we do tourism marketing for the entire county. The other financial statement you have there is a budget to actual, and that shows the occupancy tax collected. This report is through 12/31. But our occupancy tax is always collected 2 months in arrears. So if a customer comes in, stays at a hotel here, say like this, in January, last month, they pay the tax to the hotel. The hotel has the 15th of February to remit that tax to the county tax office. And then the tax office issues a report at the end of February. And then those funds are submitted on paper to our finance officer, Margaret Pierce, who then lets me know what percentage of that has come in and what the total amount is. So we're always 2 months behind. And so December 31st doesn't actually cover 6 months of occupancy tax collections. It's more like 5 months. So we're always a little bit behind on that. But we are doing well on occupancy tax collections. I want to talk about the storm for a minute. So our hotels remain full to this day since Hurricane Helene hit. They're full of contract workers, railroad repair people, insurance adjusters, and others that are working in industry here. And also people that are just leisure travelers are still coming as well. We're still having weddings and special events here that are putting people in the hotels. October, the first few days of October, occupancy tax was down, but then it kicked back up, and October set a new all-time record for occupancy tax collection in Burke County. November was also an all-time record. November was up 98% over the previous November. December is going to be very high as well. Margaret just told me a few minutes ago, we're at roughly $125,000 collected so far that we know about. That will be another all-time record for December as well. Interesting, people always ask me what's the hotel rates in Burke County, and we have a system, we keep track of that through some research that's done for us. The average daily rate for a hotel room in Burke County in 2024 was $111. In 2023, it was just over $100. So the average daily rate, which is a true indicator of supply and demand, meaning there's more demand than there is supply, drives the rate up. So it went up about 10% in 2024. The other metric that we measure is the visitors that walk into our visitor center at 140 North Sterling Street in downtown Morganton prior to Helene. So January through September, we were up 70% over the previous year of walk-in traffic. After Helene, it dropped off severely in October, November. December, it started to pick back up towards the end of December. And in January, we're even with last year. So we are starting to see a recovery in visitors coming back since the storm. It's been an interesting few months. The visitors that were coming in, right after the storm definitely were changed. A lot of them were here to help. We were there to help them, assist them as they were looking for people and places to help in Burke County. So that's kind of the report for the finances and what hotels are doing. I'll entertain any questions before I go into the next part of the.
Has anybody got any questions?
Good.
Okay, without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Phillips on the resolution supporting the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Yes, so I wanted to present this resolution to you guys today. I had a Teams call similar to a Zoom call with the superintendent of the Blue Ridge Parkway 2 weeks ago. I had requested that from her because Blue Ridge Parkway, the Linville Falls Visitor Center, is our #1 attraction in Burke County. It has been for years and years. Over 1 million people visit the Linville Falls Visitor Center, and I'm sure you guys know where that is, right off the Parkway up there. So the storm, and this is the Parkway's statement on this, the Linville Falls Visitor Center was heavily damaged and considered a total loss. Repairs to the infrastructure will not be completed in 2025, and the area will remain closed off of the Parkway. The Linville Falls Campground was also damaged and may not reopen in 2025. That opening date here has yet to be determined. The Linville River Picnic Area, which is on the Linville River across the street from Linville Falls, was also heavily damaged and will definitely remain closed in 2025. Also, access to the Linville Falls overlooks from the U.S. Forest Service gravel parking lot, which is located on Old NC Highway 105, is closed. The parking lot's clear, received no damage, but the trail from there down to the Linville Falls was heavily damaged. So I talked to the superintendent about partial openings, like if you can get a little place open and people can access that. At this time, that is not an option because of the heavy equipment required going in and out and along the Parkway. By the way, the Parkway is closed through there to access the areas that need to be closed. And just allowing visitors anywhere near that would be a liability problem for them, and we don't want people getting injured or hurt because of that. So as part of the Parkway, the Blue Ridge Parkway Association, and there's two of them, the Blue Ridge Parkway Association and organization. If you get a license plate in North Carolina that has Blue Ridge Parkway on it, it's the yellow plate, that money goes to the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. And that foundation then takes that money and helps the Parkway make repairs, helps the Parkway market and promote what's going on the Parkway. So that's a very important organization with the Blue Ridge Parkway. So they approached me about asking the county commissioners here to support a resolution supporting funding for repairs and strategic implementation of the Blue Ridge Rising Action Plan along the Blue Ridge Parkway. The parkway generates approximately $1.4 billion in visitor spending and $1.8 billion in total economic output. Did you know the Blue Ridge Parkway is the most visited national park in the United States? 17 million people traveled the parkway last year. So it's an important park to us in Burke County. We have a little less than 5 miles of the parkway goes through the county, but it is heavily visited. So the resolution, I'm not going to read it, but it's not, doesn't ask for any funding from the county or anyone else. It's just a supportive resolution. And so I ask that you endorse and support this today.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, without any objection, we'll leave this on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Next, we'll hear from Caitlin Settlemeyer again from Animal Services about a proclamation declaring February as Spay and Neuter Month.
Good afternoon again. I hope that you would join us in recognizing and proclaiming February as Spay-Neuter Awareness Month in Burke County. Responsible pet ownership is a cornerstone of a healthy and humane community, and one of the most impactful ways we can support that is through spaying and neutering our pets. Pet overpopulation continues to place a significant burden on shelters, leading to overcrowding and, unfortunately, the euthanasia of otherwise healthy and adoptable animals. However, spaying and neutering has been scientifically proven to reduce these numbers, prevent certain health and behavioral issues, and lessen the strain on county resources. Here in Burke County, we are fortunate to have the dedication of Animal Services Foundation, Reason, local veterinarians, and rescue organizations working hard to provide access to affordable spay and neuter services. Their efforts help ensure that pet owners and community caregivers have the resources they need to make responsible choices. By increasing public awareness and encouraging participation in these programs, we can create a more compassionate and sustainable future for animals in our community. We encourage all residents to take action, spay and neuter your pets, support local initiatives, and help spread the word about responsible pet ownership. And together we can make a lasting impact.
Any questions? Thank you, Caitlin. Without objection, then we'll leave this on the regular agenda. Thank you. Okay, our next, we're going to go past 5 there down to number 6. Approval of budget amendment number 9, $329,871, presented by Mr. Brian Epley, our county manager.
Thank you, sir. This is a request to budget, $329,000, as you said, $871. This is all a state grant from the Department of Public Health. We received an administrative agreement with that guides the parameters, and we're largely trying to use that to improve, offset existing costs, but also provide some additional support as we try to manage through environmental health and getting more current, using some contract labor and some other things. So the budget amendment's in your packet for review. I'm certainly happy to answer any question you want, but it's just a request to budget a state grant.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, without objection, this will remain on the agenda also. Our next presentation is from the Tax Department, which is a tax collection report for January 2025, presented by Namrita Nelson. Hey.
Hi. I think I turned the mic on. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the board. I'm here on behalf of our tax administrator, Mr. John Bridges, who is feeling a little under the weather. I was here to go over a couple of key matrices from our department. First off is the status of collections for fiscal year ending January 31, 2025, so that's 7 months. Property tax, the amount collected is $51,634,093.25. That's 94.23% collected. The balance to collect is $3,159,085.75. Motor vehicle tax, amount collected is $3,238,290.04. That's 63.79% collected. The balance left to collect is $1,837,953.96. Current year taxes collected were $54,872,383.29, which is 91.65% collected. Balance left to be collected is $4,997,039.71. Delinquent taxes, $393,383.73 collected, which is 56.22%. Amount left to be collected is $306,616.27. Penalty and interest is $203,761.07, which is 61.98% collected. Balance to be collected is $125,238.93. The tax levy collected was $70,250,389.11. Amount collected year-to-date was $51,634,093.25. The percent collected was 73.5%, and the balance left to be collected is $18,616,295.86. The status of refunds and releases for the month of January. The reported amount was $11,778.31. Rebuild amounts were $4,557.60. Released $7,220.71, and that's our report.
Does anybody have any questions on item number 7 there, the tax collection report? Okay, if there are no questions or objections, then that item will also remain on the agenda. And do we have any questions on the release refund report for January 2025?
No.
Okay, with that objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Navarrete.
you.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Thanks, Ms. Nelson.
Okay, next on the agenda is items for decision. Number 1 on that is the clerk appointments to the Burke County Planning Board, presented by Kay Drone, clerk to the board. There's 2 seats, both are for the east, and we have 3 applicants, I believe, at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to make some appointments to the Burke County Planning Board for seat number 1 and seat number 2 that are both east, as Commissioner Smith indicated. And as of today, we have 3 applicants on file at this time. We could have some more by the time the meeting rolls around, and if they are, we'll certainly include those for you. The term for seat number 1 is to complete the remainder of a term ending September 30th, 2027. And for seat 2, the term ends September 30th, 2025. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Does anybody have any questions? Sir. Okay. With that objection, this item will remain on the agenda. And next, we have the BDI, Burke Business Park Project Management Agreement, presented by Brian Epley, our county manager.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I think the board's aware that in late December, as the legislature took action on a variety of bills, there were some modifications made to funding that was provided to BDI in October of 2023 for an economic development grant that was originally $35.8 million and earmarked specifically for the Great Meadows Industrial Park. As we've talked about many times, the funding was split into 2 distinct channels. Of the $35 million, roughly $22 million was unrestricted and could be used, at the discretion of the local project managers, but about 13.8 of that was restricted for water and wastewater infrastructure expansion. The property, BDI has an option with the property owners that goes through 2033 at an acquisition price of $32 million. So the unrestricted portion isn't sufficient for that, nor is there enough of the grant available to start to develop the product. And so really this idea of, could we create flexibility with those funds to do something meaningful in the lens of economic development, job creation, and tax-based investment in Burke County? And this is, that legislation was considered by the General Assembly as part of many bills in December and approved, granting flexibility for 20 million of the 22 unrestricted. The 13.8 stays as it was, the other 2 million of the 22 stays as it was. But we have $20 million from that original grant that can be used for construction of shell industrial buildings inside Burke Business Park. As a reminder, there's already pad graded sites, there's already water sewer infrastructure, and really I think that there's a heck of an opportunity to have some speed to market and really see some investment in our community. Part of that legislation, though, the General Assembly thought it was wise to have a project management agreement between BDI, who's the grant holder, and the county. And largely, that's what's in your packet for consideration. That's what we'll be presenting in 2 weeks for the board to consider. The components of the project management agreement, I think, are fairly simple. It basically says that there's going to be a joint effort to make decisions. Decisions could be on who is the architectural firm? First, are we going to do it? And then secondly, if we do move forward, who would be the architectural firm? Who would be the general contractor? What do we want our ceiling heights to be? Which pad do we want to build on? What square footage do we want to consider? All of those type things, and we'll be talking about this more in depth at your work session coming up in a couple of weeks. But largely for consideration on this agenda is just the baseline project management agreement that says that BDI and the county will work jointly to make sure that we're advancing this opportunity if the board so sees fit, and doing it in a mutually agreeable way. Happy to answer any questions you guys may have, but it's a I think at least at this point a fairly simple agreement.
If there are no questions, then we'll leave this item on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Epley.
Brian.
Okay, now we'll move to item 7, reports and comments. We'll hear from Corey Fisher-Wellman from the Department of Social Services for the monthly operational report. Oh,
Can I sneak in there?
yes, ma'am, please.
Your third decision item is the appointment to the Child Protection, Child Fatality Prevention Team that you moved as part of your agenda approval. We have seat number 7, which is one of 4 at-large seats on this committee. It's vacant, and at the time the agenda was produced and disseminated, we had 1 application on file. We received a second one around lunchtime today, so now you have 2 applicants for 1 seat, and the term is 3 years ending April 30th, 2027, and there could be others that might come in before the meeting. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, if there are no objections, we'll leave this item on the agenda. And now we'll get Mr. Corey Wellman up here Corey Fisher-Wellman to give us a report from the Department of Social Services about monthly operations.
Thank you. It feels like we have a smaller setting today, so if you have questions, you don't have to wait to the end. Just hop in and ask. So we'll go through our monthly updates here, starting off with some personnel. This is the same slide we show every month, just to kind of show our personnel growth over the last several years. Our most recent FTEs that were added as a result of Medicaid expansion in December of 2023. And then just a snapshot of kind of where we are currently. When this capital appointment was prepared, we had 29 open positions. Of those 29, 12 either are in somewhere in the hiring process, whether that's a conditional offer, final offer, or the candidate has a start date. So if we were to, those 29 minus 12 and get us down to 17 open positions that don't have any candidates, which would put us at an under 10% vacancy rate, which not exactly where we want to be, but a little bit more in line with other DSSs our size across the state. And then there's a little snapshot of the month of December. We had 9 folks who voluntarily resigned. We were able to fill 6 of those positions over the course of the month. I will say a little plug that's helping us we recently added, the HR team recently added a full-time position who's stationed at the health department and DSS, who's only working with our two organizations. That's been very helpful in helping us to work through these interviews and the hiring process much more efficiently. Some operational updates. This is a snapshot of our MOU measurements in economic services. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the MOU and kind of what that means and how that looks across the agency at the end, but this just demonstrates that we're continuing to meet all of our economic services MOU measurements month over month. Just a little bit of an update from economic services. There was a management audit that was completed for FNS and Energy, which resulted in no financial payback, so always a good thing. There have been a number of Medicaid waivers associated with the hurricane that will are expected to end at the end of this month. And then in the last month, we've also started a new funding that you guys approved last month was the disaster funding, which we started giving out those funds to folks who need help in the county. And then we've also, you can see there approved over 157 LEAP applications during the month of December, which resulted in us giving out just a little bit over $50,000 directly to residents here in Burke County. This is just a snapshot of our Medicaid caseloads, and you can see there kind of month over month how many recipients we have in the different Medicaid programs, and then the numbers at the end that are in green are how quickly we're getting those approved and timely. So you can see consistently Amanda's folks are getting those done in a timely way and making sure people get their benefits timely. And this, if you look at our active FNS cases, which is food nutrition services, I think one of the most you can see there the number of cases, but I think one of the more interesting numbers is that very last number that we're giving out over $2 million in FNS benefits every single month, which is money that's going directly into the economy here in Burke County that's being spent in grocery stores and other folks where people buy their food. Some updates about child welfare. We currently have 175 children experiencing foster care and about 290 open cases in CPS, which is about 18 cases per worker. You can see there for the full month of 2024, we received 1,600 CPS reports, which if you look, you can kind of see how those, if you just take the month of December, we received 93 reports, 72 of those were screened out. So of those 1,600 for the year, there would be a small portion of those that were screened out, but you can kind of see the workload month over month. And then we also had 4 children who exited foster care, or 4 children who entered foster care in December, and 5 who exited, 4 through adoption, and 1 child who was reunified with his parents. A little bit about our adult services. We currently have 57 adult wards that we're responsible for, and then an additional 17 that we contract out through a third party. We have 51 active participants in our special assistance in-home and 145 current recipients in our community alternatives program. And this is where we'll talk a little bit more about the MOU. So in 2024, several years ago, the counties had to enter into an MOU with DHHS indicating that they would meet these performance metrics throughout the agency, and there could be consequences for failure to do so. For the last several years, mostly as a result of COVID, there has been no corrective action for failure to meet MOU outcomes, but that, beginning in January of 2025, DHHS is going back to expecting counties to meet all the measurements in the MOU. There is an exception for the 25 counties impacted by the hurricane, and those will be delayed by, I think, 3 months. So we would be in that group that's got a 3-month pause, but we meet our MOU outcomes every month. So you can see there it does indicate there is a corrective action process if you were to not meet for an extended period of time. Depending on if it's an annual measurement or a monthly measurement, you would have to enter into some sort of corrective action with the state to try to help ensure that you were able to meet it moving forward. And this is just, that breaks down all the different measurements. I won't read each one of them because it's just kind of showing there's 9 metrics that we have to meet throughout the agency, and this kind of just breaks those down. And you can see there what we have to do in energy and workforce, along with food, nutrition, as well as child. There are more metrics in child welfare, but the only one they're holding counties accountable to right now is the counties must ensure that 95% of children experiencing foster care have to be seen in the home they're living in each month. Then there you can see the adult protective services as well as special assistance and the child support performance measures as well. And then lastly, just a little bit about the budget process. There was January 9th, there was a department head meeting for all departments just to get the budget process started. All the necessary documents have been sent out to 8 departments, including us, and then we'll be one of the last counties who will meet with Brian and his budget team to go over our budget and plan for next year. And just a snapshot of kind of where we are in this year. The numbers at the top, all sorts of different line items in which the DSS has either revenue or expenses, but I think the more important thing is you can see at the bottom where our budget is, the total number versus what we've, through the end of December, which I think just demonstrates that we're on pace to be right at or a little under what our budgeted amount was. So happy to answer any questions any of you guys might have.
Mr. Bailey? Hey, Corey, you know, usually we don't make decisions on pre-agenda, and we did in January about the LEAP funding, I believe you
It was
called it.
the emergency funds, yes.
Yeah, can you remind me what that total was? It seemed like it was a pretty big amount.
It was a big amount broken up into 4 different pots of money, and I don't know.
And it was a pretty short term to.
It is yes, and it will, the shortest term is that the state is going to continue to monitor spending, and they will reallocate to other counties so it's basically spend it or lose it in the counties. If you don't spend it quick enough, it is possible it will be reallocated to other counties.
And so I'm curious, how are we getting that out to the community?
Sure.
Have we expended all that we have available?
So there's 4 different areas. Amanda was just telling me before we started, you might want to come up and provide some greater detail, but I know we've made a lot of progress in some of the energy and rental assistance funding. The child welfare central services fund is a little bit more tricky. That's probably the fund we're slower in just because it's hard to find things that meet that criteria. I know that in adult services, they're actively working through some projects with some of the folks they're working with to help with some pretty big chunks of money that will be related to storm damage and stuff like that. So I do think we are making every effort to make sure we get that money spent in Burke County, but she can talk to you a little bit about the spending in her area.
As far as in economic services, we have been really proactive about getting that money out there. So because we are out of crisis intervention money and we are out of low-income energy assistance money, we have really pushed the disaster funds. We have spent roughly $200,000 already. So we've already spent half of the funds in the disaster part of the program. The rental assistance, we have also spent quite a bit of money in there. I think we have, I can't remember the exact amount, so I don't want to give you a false amount. But I do know that we have been extremely busy, and we have definitely spent we have spent a good bit of that money. Matter of fact, the state had reached out to us about did we want to reallocate that money, and as of right now, I think we decided no, we did not. We felt like we were still, spending the money and giving to our county, because, here's the deal with that, like, I always want to help everyone. However, if we still have the need in Burke County, we need to make sure the funds are spent in Burke County. So we don't want to reallocate those funds early. But yeah, I think that we're definitely seeing a need for that, and we're making sure that those funds get spent here in Burke.
How do people find out about it?
Well, first they'll come in. If they come in with any kind of need, it doesn't really matter where. Like, for example, if they come in for Medicaid or if they come in for food stamps, those workers are already referring those people and asking questions to see if there are additional things within our agency. We can go ahead and get to those folks. And so there's that. And then when people call having a need for energy or for rental assistance or through their story that we can pick up on, those are things they need, then we are referring them and getting them taken care of.
Okay. I think in terms of that money in particular, the community is used to us having the SIP and LEAP money for energy and heat and those kind of things. So they're used to coming to us, and because we've already expended those funds, we are able to use these funds to help kind of meet our additional needs. So that kind of, like, that method or way into the door is kind of already established because people are used to coming to DSS for energy assistance and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you for that. And kind of to switch gears, one other question. I see on the report that we have an ongoing issue with, the placement crisis, critical shortage of appropriate foster care options for our children in need. What kind of things maybe in the last 90 days are we doing in the community to recruit, find?
Sure.
Folks here?
I think those are, there's always a need for additional foster parents, and I think we are actively trying to attend, community activities and trying to make classes more regularly available so that people who are interested can become licensed. I think the need some of that is speaking to the need for higher levels of care, which causes kids oftentimes have to sleep in our building. That is usually not a result of a lack of family foster homes. That's typically a result of the lack of higher level of treatment-based providers, and that a lot of that is out of the local hands. We have a very little impact on whether or not there's more psychiatric treatment facilities or more level 3 or higher levels of treatment-based placement. And those are typically the kids that are harder to place who end up in either the ED or in our office, unfortunately.
I got a question. Now, did I hear you right? There were 9 personnel left in 1 month, December. Is that correct?
That is, yes.
What do you, I don't know, but that seems
Sure.
like kind of a high attrition
It is,
rate. What's going on?
Sure. I would say that the last, from September to the end of the year, we did experience probably one of the higher periods of time that people leave. And I think there's a whole bunch of factors. I think if you start in economic services, you had people who were likely hired during COVID. A lot of those waivers and things went away, and a job they thought they were comfortable doing became a very different job, and that became overwhelming. I think that caused some turnover. We had some personnel changes in child welfare, where anytime you have a personnel change at a high kind of executive level and changes in what expectations are, that can lead to higher turnover. I also think you saw, the hurricane happened and we were out of our building for a number of days, and then we had to do DSNAP, which was a success, but it led to people's just day-to-day work being interrupted or different for 5, 6, 7 weeks. So people who were kind of struggling to keep up, got further behind, and unfortunately, you do see a lot of times in DSS, because there's 99 other DSSs, you kind of get behind and you apply at the county next door and you kind of go start over. So December was a higher month. I do think we've seen that slow down, and we're getting some of the supervisor positions filled, which I think provides some stability and a little bit more, makes workers feel kind of better about what they're doing day to day. But we've definitely been in a little bit of a higher stretch than normally we would experience.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all the work that all of you do. It's important work you do. Does anybody else have any more questions? If there are no objections, then we'll leave this item on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith, we need to take action on this one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to accept the report as presented?
Make a motion.
All in favor? Thank you. I know you didn't want to come back and have to go through that spiel again, did you? Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is other discussion items. And please submit your reports to the clerk as soon as possible for inclusion in the agenda packet for the regular meeting. Courtesy reminders, February the 14th, Burke County Board of Commissioners opioid recessed meeting at 8:30 a.m. February the 17th, Board of Commissioners regular meeting at 6 p.m. March the 6th and 7th will be our Burke County Board of Commissioners budget retreat at 8 a.m. at the North Carolina School of Science and Math Barn. And I was over there today for my tour, and I want to tell you that's a nice place. Burke County ought to be proud to have a place like that around here. Youth groups that are interested in leading the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of the Board of Commissioners meeting can sign up via the form on the county's website. Spay and neuter your pets. Foster or adopt a pet from the Burke County Animal Services. Cover your loads to the convenience centers and the landfill, and please don't litter and pick up your trash. All righty, action items, we have none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Or does anybody else have anything that they want to say on the other side of the room over there, or we good to go? Do I hear a motion we adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor, raise your hand, please. Madam Chairman, that's a unanimous vote.
Thank you.